Right then, AI. It's been making headlines everywhere, hasn't it? And that leads us nicely to today's deep dive, the whole thing about cutting-edge technology, but also, those worries, well, anxieties, I guess, about privacy and security. I mean, they've been around forever, right? We're focusing on Juan Masoinati. Now, he's a war journalist and also a tech innovator. And his recent article, it alleges, well, a pretty serious breach by Intel.
Yeah, what I think is so interesting here is Juanma's background. I mean, having seen for himself the impact of information control, in these conflict zones, that experience really gives his perspective some weight, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's not just sitting back coming up with theories, is he? He's seen what happens.
Yeah.
So what's Wanma actually saying? Well, he's claiming that these Intel processors, especially this thing called the Integrated Management Engine, or IME, they contain what he calls a backdoor. I guess you could call it a secret way in.
Now, the IME, it was designed to manage devices remotely, something for IT professionals, just to make things a bit easier. But Soinity's argument is that this very feature, that's how it could be exploited to get into devices, even when they're switched off.
And the thing is, he suggests there's this link between Intel and the NSA, like maybe hinting that this backdoor was put there on purpose for them to use. It's a pretty big accusation.
It is, yeah, definitely. Intel's downplayed it all, of course. But then again, we've seen similar concerns about some other tech companies.
True, but Intel, it's different. Their chips are everywhere. We're talking personal computers, servers, and even really important things like power grids. So if he's right, that creates a whole network open to, well, spying. And that impacts everyone, doesn't it? Individuals, businesses, even governments. It's global.
And that's where AI comes into all this. The modern processors from Intel, they rely so much on AI. I mean, they're built to handle massive amounts of data and all those complex machine learning algorithms that power so much of what we do online these days.
So what does that mean when it comes to being watched, surveillance?
Well, imagine all these AI algorithms, and they're sifting through your data, analyzing what you do online, and then using that to work out what you might do in the future. That's way beyond just normal surveillance. It's making a proper profile of who you are, what you're all about, and maybe even, well, influencing what you do.
That's a scary thought, really, isn't it? It's like privacy is just going to disappear.
Well, it's definitely under threat like never before.
Here's another thought, and it's not a nice one. If, let's say, intelligence agencies can use these backdoors, what does that do to digital sovereignty? Could another country get in and mess with things like important infrastructure in another country, sabotage things?
That's a massive question, isn't it? Especially now, with everything going on in the world. Think about the chaos if something like that happened.
It's like something you'd see in a spy film, right? But it could happen. And then there's the question of how the world reacts to all of this.
And, the reactions have been really interesting. Take China, for example. They've been very vocal, calling for these audits of Intel products that are sold in China. It's all about national security.
I suppose it makes sense. They don't want to take any chances.
And then in the West, it's been a little more cautious, but you can definitely sense those anxieties rising, about privacy and protecting what's important.
So it seems like the world is waking up to the fact that technology is powerful and we need to be careful. But before we go on, we have to say, Juan Masoinity has done incredible work to bring this all out in the open. His courage, his commitment to getting to the truth, it's amazing.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, he's really shining a light on something that's been hidden away, something pretty dark in the tech world, and we owe him for that.
We really do. Now, coming back to this whole thing about the breach and how it affects the world, it feels like we're at this crossroads, trying to find that balance between security on one hand and freedom on the other, in this digital age, I mean.
It's a tough balance to find, for sure, and it needs a lot of thought, a lot of open discussion.
Exactly. So what are the important questions we should all be asking as we try to make sense of all this?
Well, how much privacy are we willing to give up to feel safe? And maybe even more important, how can we protect ourselves when even the chips in our devices could be compromised?
Those are big questions, and I think we need to look at them in more detail. But before we do that, let's move on to how different countries are reacting to all of this. How are they dealing with the fact that AI could be used to watch us on a huge scale?
Let's do that. Now, before we move on to how the world's reacting, let's dig a bit deeper into what Soinity's worried about with AI. One of the most interesting things he says is that AI changes how data can be analyzed. It's like nothing we've seen before.
So it's not just about someone seeing what you're doing online.
No, it's about predicting what you'll do next. These machine learning algorithms, They can go through huge amounts of information. They find patterns, and then they make predictions about how you'll behave. And they can be incredibly accurate. It's like there's a digital version of you, a profile made from everything, your habits, your preferences, even the things that make you vulnerable.
So they go from just seeing what you're doing to predicting what you might do.
Exactly. And think about this information not just for those targeted adverts, which are creepy enough, but for manipulating people.
In what way?
Well, Soinati says this level of knowledge, it could be used to change what the public thinks, influence elections, even control how individuals behave. And that's a threat, isn't it, to our own autonomy? And it could even undermine, well, democracy itself.
It sounds a bit far-fetched, like something out of a dystopian novel.
But we can't just ignore it. The potential for misuse is huge. And the thing is, most people have no idea this kind of surveillance is even happening.
And that's what makes Sonati's work so important. He's bringing it all out in the open.
That's right. He talks about real-world examples of how AI is being used for surveillance already, like China's social credit system, where algorithms track what people do and then give them scores, and those scores can affect everything, like getting services or even just moving around freely.
That's a bit scary, isn't it? It shows how this technology can be used to control people's lives.
And it's not just China. Governments around the world, they're all starting to use AI for surveillance.
So what can we do about it? Are we just going to end up in this world where everything we do is watched and analyzed?
Not necessarily. Being aware of it is the first step. The more people understand the risks of this kind of AI surveillance, the more pressure there is on governments and tech companies to do something about it, put some safeguards in place.
So we need more transparency, more accountability.
Absolutely. We need rules about how this technology can be used and what kind of data can be collected.
And we need to support those who are working to find ethical and responsible ways to use AI, like Juan Soinati.
Exactly. His Deep True project is a great example. He's using AI and blockchain technology to create tools that protect data and give power back to individuals. It's a bit like fighting fire with fire, using technology to fight the misuse of technology.
That's good to hear. It means there are people out there fighting back, trying to find solutions.
It does give you some hope, doesn't it? But we need to act now. The future of privacy and freedom, especially in this digital world, it depends on it.
This has all got me thinking about how much responsibility the tech companies themselves have. They're the ones making these powerful technologies. Do they really understand what it all means, the ethics of it all?
That's the big question, isn't it? They have a responsibility to make sure that what they create isn't used to do harm.
It's not enough just to invent new things. It has to be done responsibly.
Exactly. They have to think about what might happen, what the consequences might be, and then build in safeguards right from the start. With great power comes great responsibility.
And we as users, we have a responsibility too, don't we? We need to know what's going on, ask questions, and demand more from the companies we're giving our data to.
We can't just sit back and consume technology. We have to be involved. We have to help shape what happens in the future. And speaking of shaping the future, let's look at how different countries are reacting to all of this. What are they doing to deal with this growing concern about AI being used to watch everyone?
Let's do that. Let's look at the global reaction to this and think about the different ways countries are dealing with it. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? This whole thing about AI and surveillance and how technology can be used in the wrong way.
Yeah, and as we finish up this deep dive, it's good to remember this isn't just some theoretical debate. It's happening. The impact of this AI surveillance stuff, it's real. It's happening all around the world.
It is, isn't it? We talked about how China's reacted earlier, but let's take a wider view. How are other countries dealing with these allegations?
Yeah.
And all the worry about AI being used for surveillance?
Well, the reactions, they've been quite different, really. China, as you said, they've been pretty proactive. They want those audits of Intel products, and they're seriously worried about national security.
Which you can understand, I suppose, given their own, use of AI for keeping an eye on things.
Yeah, exactly. But even in the West, where the response has been a bit more cautious, I think there's definitely this growing awareness and a feeling that something needs to be done, like now.
Right. There's more debate, isn't there, about data privacy and ethical AI, and whether we need tougher rules.
Yeah, and some countries are taking action. The EU, for example, they've been leading the way on data protection with GDPR, and now they're working on regulations specifically for AI.
That's good to hear. It seems like those who make the laws are starting to catch up with how fast technology is moving.
It's slow, but it's happening. And it's not just governments either. You've got those civil society organizations and privacy groups that are really important too. Raising awareness, pushing for change.
It feels like everyone's waking up to the dangers of technology when it's not controlled properly.
And that's what Juan Masoyati is trying to do with his work, isn't he? He's not just pointing out a problem, he's making us think about the tech we use and demand more from the people who make it.
Right. A more ethical approach, one that puts human rights first, individual freedom.
In that message, it goes way beyond just intel. It's a call to action for all of us.
So what happens now? What can we do, each of us, to protect our privacy, to make sure tech is used for good, not for bad?
Well, the first thing is to stay informed, right? Find out about the risks of AI surveillance, how your data can be collected, how it's used, and what you can do to reduce those risks.
People say knowledge is power, don't they?
Yeah.
We can also support those groups that are fighting for privacy and digital rights.
Definitely. There are so many out there doing amazing work, fighting for better rules, developing tech that actually helps with privacy, and making sure companies are held accountable.
And we can make our voices heard too. You can contact those who make the decisions. Tell them what you think. Make them prioritize privacy and protecting data.
It's easy to feel helpless when it's all so huge, but we're not, are we? We have to use our collective voice.
And let's not forget the choices we make as individuals. We can choose to support those companies that actually care about privacy, be careful about what we share online, and do what we can to secure our devices.
It all adds up. It's not about being a tech whiz or some kind of privacy obsessive. It's about being aware and taking steps to protect ourselves and our freedoms.
Absolutely. And a big thank you to Juan Masoyati. What he's done to bring this all to light, it's really brave.
He's so dedicated, isn't he, to getting to the truth and fighting for a better, more ethical approach to tech. You have to admire that.
He shows that one person can make a difference, even when they're up against these powerful forces.
And he reminds us we all have a part to play in shaping the future of technology.
Right. So to everyone listening, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you something to think about and maybe even inspired you to do something.
The future of our digital world, it's not set in stone. It's up to all of us to make sure it respects our values and protects our freedoms.
On that note, we'll leave you to consider what it all means, this new world we're living in. Until next time, keep asking questions, stay informed, and be careful out there.